Today we're going to be talking about rectangles in topic 5. Now, what's cool about a rectangle is that it's just a special parallelogram. So since it's a special parallelogram, we already know 5 properties about a rectangle. First of all, what is the definition of a parallelogram? Opposite sides are parallel. The symbol for parallel, that double L. We also know that the opposite sides are congruent. The symbol for congruent, opposite angles are also congruent. And the diagonals bisect each other. That means they cut each other in half. One set of opposite sides is both congruent and parallel. So that's kind of another cool property. We already know all that stuff about rectangles because a rectangle is just a special parallelogram. But what makes it so special? Let's look at the definition of a rectangle to see what comes up. Just like parallelograms, the word rectangle helps us out a little bit. It has the word angle in it. So a parallelogram with 4 congruent angles. But here's what's so special about those angles. If I have a parallelogram, which is a quadrilateral, it has 360 degrees in it. If I divide that by 4, what do I get? 90. So not only are these congruent angles, we have a special word for them. Those are right angles because they're all 90 degrees. So if I look at example 1, and one thing I notice right from jump is it tells me QRST. So just a quick, that is a very directional thing here. I read like I read from left to right, and I just find Q. I go from Q to R to S to T. So that's how I name a rectangle or a parallelogram or any shape. I just have to remember that I need to go around the shape. So what do I know about this 3x minus 12? I know that it's 90. So I'm going to make an equation. Because in geometry, it's all about taking something out of a shape and making an equation so I can solve it. I'm going to add 12 to both sides. And then I'm going to divide by 3. And I end up with x equals 34. Now over here, I know that all of my angles are 90. But what I notice even more importantly is they hid a triangle, and it's actually a right triangle inside that rectangle. And what do I know about triangles? They add up to 180. So if I need to make an equation out of this, I have my x, my 54, my 90, and all together they add to 180. So I'm going to combine my like terms, subtract 144 on both sides, and x is equal to 36. Now, something else happens when we have 90-degree angles and perpendicular lines. We end up looking at slopes. So if I look, let's read. Since the opposite sides of all parallelograms are parallel, what do we know about their slopes? They're the same. So opposite sides have the same slopes because they're parallel. Since consecutive sides form right angles, those are the ones that are right next to each other, we know that those slopes are opposite reciprocals of each other. So on example 3, it says here's A, B, C, D, and the slope of CD is negative 2/3. What do I know about the slope of AB? Well, AB is parallel, and parallel lines have the same slope, and the slopes are the same. Now it says, what about the slope of BC? Well, because this is a right angle, this is perpendicular. Symbol for perpendicular looks like this. These slopes are negative, so the perpendicular is going to be positive, and I'm going to flip that fraction. So I get a positive 3/2. So now we understand what's going on with the right angle. Let's look at the property that comes from when we make these angles right. When I make right angles, what ends up happening is my diagonals become congruent. So not only do they bisect each other, but they're all the same size. So first one says RT, that goes from R all the way to T, that's the whole thing, is 14. So from R to B, we know that this was bisected, so each of these is 7. Now QB and BS happen to also be 7 because those diagonals are congruent. So let's look at example 4. QRST is a rectangle. All the way from S to Q is 24. BQ, which is half of that, is 12 and 12. It's also 5x minus 18. So 5x minus 18 is the same as, and this is where it's going to come into play, BQ is 12. So 5x minus 18 is 12. I'm going to add 18 to both sides, divide by 5, and x equals 6. So now go ahead and try some practice problems. You may have to draw a rectangle. Don't forget how to label and go around the shape, and solve some problems.